Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our first meeting of 2023. I'm Kevin Murdoch, Mayor of Oak Bay, and I'm chairing this regular meeting of Council. As we call this meeting to order, in 2023, we do as we all our meetings, just acknowledge that the lands in which we're gathering is the traditional territories of the Coast and Straits Salish peoples. Specifically, we recognize the Lekwungen-speaking peoples, known today as the Songhees and Esquimalt nations, and that their historic connections to these lands and adjoining waters continue to this day. Up first, we have approval of the agenda. I'm going to move in a seconder. Moved and seconded. Are there any changes that people like to see? Anything? Discussion? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. Thank you. We have adoption of the minutes. We can move them together, and if there's any changes, we can deal with those. We're just going to move in a seconder to adopt. Moved and seconded. Thank you. Any changes, corrections, amendments? Yes, go ahead.
Yes, just one minor thing, please. I did note that in item 2022-855 and 856, it just referred to maintaining the housing stock, but the item was maintaining the rental housing stock. So if we could just have that added back in, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Mr. Coates.
Your Worship, so we did have that brought up earlier in the day and made an administrative correction, so the minutes before council reflect that as well.
My apologies through the mayor. I did not look at the updated agenda or the minutes if they were attached to it. I'm sorry.
No, it's a good reminder because quite often there are some changes like that come forward, and we always encourage people to just let staff know ahead of time so those can be incorporated, any corrections or changes like that. So thank you for that, Councillor Watson. Any other changes, corrections? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed? It carries. We have a rise and report from the closed meeting of December 12th. Just some appointments moved and seconded. We don't usually discuss rise and report since we're just acknowledging work already done. So I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed? That carries. Thank you. Moving on to Mayor's remarks. I just want to point out, if you're watching the live stream, particularly on YouTube, there's about a minute or two delay. So if you're intending to call into the public participation period following this, I would encourage you to call the 1-855 number that's in the agenda. Enter the passcode and hit *9 to raise your hand, and that'll show up in our internal systems. And I will call on you as soon as I'm done my comments, which are, however, fairly brief. So first, Happy New Year to everybody here on council and to staff and to all those at home. Certainly we had an excellent New Year's levee where we undertook a tradition of a walk with council and reception afterwards with coffee and cookies made by staff. It was quite well attended this year. Both the walk, I think we had about 70 people on the walk and a little over 100, I think, in total at the reception. So thank you to everybody who came out, and certainly hope to see you all next year as well. I do want to express my appreciation to Public Works, Parks, Fire, and Police, who, of course, worked hard over Christmas to clear streets, deal with infrastructure issues, and provide key services throughout the heavy snow and other winter weather. I want to remind the public that there's a sidewalk expansion public feedback process underway, so please participate in that. And last piece here is, or not quite last piece, but just a reminder or let people know we're still struggling with some staff restrictions at some of our rec centers. So particularly in pools, some of those hours are restricted. So if you're attending the pool, particularly early or late in the day, I would encourage you just to call ahead and make sure that it's open and available. And of course, if you're a lifeguard looking for work, give us a call. I would love to have you come and help us out. And yeah, I just look forward to healthy, both always physical and mental 2023, and look forward to the work that we have ahead of us, which is certainly plentiful. With that, we can move on to the public participation portion of the meeting. And if anybody wishes, there's nobody in the chambers here who has come in to speak to us. For those watching, we allocate time at every meeting, both committee of the whole and council, that allows for the public to come and address council on issues of interest to them that are interest to Oak Bay. We allocate 3 minutes per person to come and speak to us, and then we can give some direction and so forth following those comments. I don't see anybody indicating online that they wish to speak. If you are called in, and I don't see anybody called in at this time, but if you are, you can hit *9 to raise your hand. If you are in the Zoom application, you would just use the reactions tab to raise your hand and let us know that you wanted to speak. I, however, don't see anybody who raises their hand. Maybe all 100 who showed up at the levee talked to us at that time, and so we have no public comment at this point. So I'm going to move on to the main body of the agenda. Section 7 is reports and memorandums. This section is subject to public input. So if you are interested in speaking to the item number 7.1, you can again call in and hit *9 to raise your hand. At this point, I'm just going to invite Mr. Boole, our Director of Community Building and Planning, to provide a little overview of this item.
Thank you, Mayor. In front of you is a report about the Alan Cassidy Recognition of Renovation and Building Achievement Awards. This follows up on a council discussion early this year, where at the time of consideration of the awards for 2021, council had a number of questions and wanted staff to report back on a number of things. This report does the reporting back. The actual nominations themselves are coming forward separately to a different meeting. Today, this report provides you the requested historical backgrounds to the awards, and also attached is a policy or a procedure that outlines how the award process has been conducted in recent years. And following up on the direction earlier this year, we decided to create this policy for clarity, so that for council, for the advisory design panel in this case, who is the assigned group to look at this, but also for staff, it's clear what is expected, and there's clear timelines also involved how to start this in time when these awards come up. There are biannual rewards, so every other year we look at this, and yeah, today this is in front of you for information, but also to approve the policy. And yeah, I welcome any questions or comments that council might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Boole. Are there any questions of staff? Councillor Patterson?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the report, Mr. Boole. Just one question I have, of course, the report refers to the Alan Cassidy Awards, which are well received in the community. But I did notice in most of the background material on it that the award is to recognize architecture, construction, and community aesthetics, which it has represented very well over the years. But today, I think some of those values have been added to by the importance of development that positively promotes or impacts environmental and energy sustainability, as well as the aesthetics in the community. And I'm just wondering if there has been any expression of interest to perhaps expand some of the criteria to allow the design panel or any awards committee that is appointed in the future to also consider those as important issues going forward, as opposed to simply the aesthetics impact on the community.
Mr. Boole?
Yeah, through the Mayor, we haven't specifically looked at that, although it is, it could be well within the scope of the panel or council to consider it. One of the specific things how the awards program was set up back in 2004 with Councillor Cassidy at the time, it looks like specifically there was no criteria set out, and it was going to be a consideration by a panel. That said, there is the scope, as Councillor Patterson mentioned, of architectural design and landscaping. I think that would be up to council to indicate if it's preferred to kind of widen the overall scope and then still allow a panel to look at relevant considerations for any of the applicants. That would be possible. I think that would be a council direction that you could give. At this point, staff hasn't really brought anything forward on that. That was not really in the scope of the type of report we were bringing back. But I think this would be in council's purview to make those kind of changes if you wanted. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Boole. Go ahead, Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Boole, for that information. And so if we, certainly realizing that it won't affect this year's decision-making, which is already in progress, if council desired to broaden the scope of that, is it appropriate that seek feedback on how that would be considered by the design panel if it was, if we wanted to amend the awards policy to include sustainability issues for consideration?
Process, Mr. Bull?
Yeah, through the mayor, that could be asked, right? Right now, in the policy, you can see that we specifically reference how the program was set up at the time in 2004 with the express intent of not having criteria. But they could be set out for an awards program like this, but it would require some follow-up work to maybe make suggested guidelines for it potentially, or maybe work with the advisor design panel on that. But right now, that is by design, and originally, I think, by the original design, it's not the case, but it could be explored as well. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Braithwaite and Councillor Green.
Thanks so much. I'm just wondering about the makeup of the committee that is being suggested. It's only staff and advisory planning commission members that would be making the decision. Is that correct? Okay, you're nodding yes. So
Sorry,
yes.
just for clarification, is it planning commission or design panel?
Sorry, design panel.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. We did have one letter from a resident questioning that, and I thought she had brought up some good points. One was in regards to having a representative from the Heritage Commission on that panel, and because apparently the original committee had 3 members of the public, 3 members at large, 1 from the Heritage Committee and then or Commission, and 2 from just regular Oak Bay residents. And I'm wondering if you can explain the process that you went through to perhaps not include of someone from Heritage in particular, because I would think, in my mind, I would think that that's quite important.
Mr. Bull?
Yeah, thank you for the mayor. This follows up on some changes that were made in 2020 when the advisory design panel bylaw was changed, and the advisory design panel was assigned to be the reviewer of these awards. We were trying to find some background on that because neither Chris Coates or myself were around at the time. At the time that the bylaw was considered, there were no separate staff reports. There may have been previous discussions that year that I am not aware of, but so at that point, the bylaw for the ADP was changed to include this provision. It's not said that it could be changed again, right? It could be adapted to new needs, and but again, would be up to council to provide a direction, and so we can make any bylaw changes or come up with whatever else we would like to see for this policy.
Go ahead, Councillor Braithwaite.
Thank you. If I can, I think at minimum, I would really prefer to see someone from the Heritage Commission or Foundation, or somebody from Heritage, sit on that panel. I'm not as particular about other members of the public, since we do have the ADP on there, but for me, and I'm not sure how everybody else feels, but for me, I would really like to see someone from Heritage sitting on there. I think that gives a good lens.
Thanks, Councillor Braithwaite. I'll go on, then we'll come back to some questions for staff. Go ahead, Councillor Green.
Yes, thank you. And I'm going to follow up on Councillor Braithwaite's question, which was the one I had, which was, what was the rationale? I can't recall in 2021 or 2020 when we made the change. I like the idea, and I agree with Councillor Braithwaite, of expanding the reach a little bit. And I'm thinking, frankly, Heritage Commission, APC, and ADP are all land use groups, as well as Recreation, Parks and Culture, because the cultural piece fits as well. So I think, I don't think we'll ever go wrong by expanding the or broadening the purview of the committee, but I couldn't remember why we confined it to the ADP. So maybe someone remembers. I couldn't, unfortunately. But I would support an expansion that includes all of the land use groups and also Parks, Recreation and Culture. Thank you.
I'm just going to ask a question of staff on this point to maybe Mr. Coates and Ms. Williams. Obviously, constituting this, the discussion of this would have to be done in camera. It wouldn't be a public discussion of the adjudication of the applications, I'm assuming. So, what's involved? Can council appoint? Just like obviously having to do a call out for a committee or something every 2 years for members of the public to apply, et cetera, is incredibly onerous. I think that was, to my mind, that was sort of the background of the why. Is there a mechanism that we can do internally if we wanted to, say, pick and choose a volunteer from a few different committees to sit on this panel and have that done as an in-camera piece? Does that require the same? I'm just curious about procedurally if there's a relatively simple way of calling something like that together. Mr. Coates?
Thank you, Your Worship. And to your question, so I think the short answer is yes, there is a way to do that. And if I understand what your comments were specifically, that council could designate other people from other committees or other committees themselves to be referred the applications and provide council with their own recommendations. So it could be in whole or in part. So if you wanted to sort of have another committee appoint someone as a representative to those considerations, that's an option. It's just a quick little tweak to their terms of reference and a little adjustment, I think, to the policy that is before you. And likewise, if it was to seek comments from existing district committees, they could be included in the policy, and that could be added to their mandates as well.
Thanks, that's helpful. Councillor Green, did you have anything else? Go ahead, Councillor Watson.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. Really continuing on your line of inquiry there, I wondered if the composition of the panel was expanded in this way, how you would actually, where in that committee structure would you find your sustainability and your environmental lens? Because I support Councillor Patterson's notion that if we are going to broaden the criteria for the award, which I think in some ways would make sense, that would have other representatives too, and not just the built form, the land use ones as well as the heritage ones. So and the culture. So it's a much broader group. And so I guess my question is, to recap, is what standing committees would we turn to get that particular perspective if you were going to change their terms of reference? Thank you.
Mr. Bull?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. For the Advisory Planning Commission, the land use part of the review that we have, that committee does include a couple of different areas, including environment, active transportation, heritage, and land use. And of course, the Heritage Commission has their focus completely on heritage. And then the advisory design panel is architects that have that kind of lens. So those are the starting points. I'm not familiar exactly with the recreation committees myself, but there would be some starting points. But yeah, possibly it depends how big of a change council is considering here. But if there are other elements needed, that would be a different change. But there's some starting points in the other committees. Thank you.
Councillor Appleton?
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to staff. I'm just speaking to and I concur with the comments to date about having additional review and additional persons involved in the review. I'm interested in the concept of nominations. The way that the policy is currently laid out is that building staff would compile the list of potential candidates and nominate notable new buildings, renovations, etc. As liaison to the Heritage Foundation, I know that the members of the Heritage Foundation and the community members who spend a lot of time looking at notable buildings like this are really interested in the component of nomination and having some input into that. So I'm just wondering whether there's any obstacles or anything that would prevent us from broadening the policy that specifically relates to who may nominate to members of the public at large.
Mr. Bull, I do notice that there's an option here in terms of advertising the local newspaper for other nominations as well. Is there a mechanism considered for just passing on the request to the place like the Heritage Foundation or Commission, so they have notice as well? Mr. Bull?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, that's correct. Right now, we do include that public input option. Yeah, if a group or maybe a panel made out of members of different groups would also look at the nominations. That's a little bit of a different approach, I think, but I think it could be included, of course, in the policy in the overall process. Yeah, and it's definitely something we can look at according to how you envision this program to function. Thank you.
Please continue, Councillor Appleton.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just quickly to follow up, and thank you, Mr. Bull. I think that because the Heritage Foundation is, by definition and current structure, not a committee or commission of council, but rather an quote-unquote external body but that does have a fairly targeted expertise, I think that the members of the foundation would appreciate, I guess, potentially a specific, there is a call for, public input. I think it would be great if we could specifically designate the Heritage Foundation as a recipient of requests for nominations in the policy. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Appleton. I'm going to go around to second. Oh, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, Councillor Smart.
That's okay. Yeah, I'm supportive as well of expanding, the reach of those voting on the projects. And I do like the sort of simple approach of finding the same intent of those three members of the public, but it could be either the chair of each one of those committees, the Arts, Advisory Planning Commission, and Heritage, and it could be either the chair or somebody that the chair selects, perhaps, but like keeping it still somewhat simple, but broadening the reach.
Thank you. I'm going to go to second-time speakers. I have my order of Braithwaite, Watson, and Green.
I was actually just going to say exactly what Councillor Smart said, just to choose one person, whether it's the chair or the vice chair from those committees to sit on and then not have to go out to the public, because then it becomes less onerous. So
Watson?
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to ask a further or comment on the nomination process and in terms of getting the word out to the community about what's been nominated. And I wondered if Mr. Bull could say, it's a limited pool of projects that people can nominate from because it's only 2 years worth of activity, right? So I wondered if it would be helpful in this process to actually just let the general public know what the total pool is, because I would guess that across the jurisdiction, it's not like there's hundreds of things to choose from, and maybe recommending some, but also like starting the nomination process staff fed, but then also letting the public know what the total pool is that they could draw from, because they themselves might be interested in driving around town and sort of taking that in as part of their involvement in providing nominations. So that's a question. So I guess my question is, in the course of 2 years of the types of things that people can draw from, what would typically be the total building activity that would give you a project?
Mr. Bull, do you have a sense of that?
Yeah, a tentative sense, because I know we're processing or receiving about close to 300 residential building permits every year, but some of those are really small. They could be internal, some of them will be smaller additions, some of them will be rebuilds. Times 2, that would be about 600. That's the start of the pool. It probably is less. What is going to be challenging is then to downsize that list. So at first glance, I would think there's probably, if you look at all, either, because it does include renovations and new builds, I think the number will be quite high, so I wouldn't be surprised, not so much the new builds perhaps, well, even that is fairly notable, I think. But there would be definitely dozens of properties. If not, I think we might get into the 100 to 200 range. So that is a bit larger of a pool, plus it would need to be vetted to tease out which permits are in that range. But yeah, maybe there could be a direction though to building staff in this case to cast a fairly wide net perhaps. So then maybe there is a certain maximum number of nominations, like maybe 25. That's maybe a reasonable amount. Something like that could definitely be considered if that's a way to further engage the public. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just going to throw a little note of caution on that one, in that not everybody wants to be nominated for awards, those sorts of things. So if we start advertising someone's address and people are driving around looking at their house, it's not always received well. So there's going to have to be some additional steps in there to make sure that they're okay with that being a public piece. They're usually okay with receiving an award, but not necessarily with it having it advertised on the piece. I have Councillor Green next.
Yes, thank you, and I agree with all of the comments that have been made. I just wanted to point out, too, that the foundation, one of the advantages about the foundation is that some of their members also sit on the commission, so you could have one committee member that has a dual role. So that's just something to think about.
I'm hearing more or less consensus here that I think a little bit broader than the advisory design panel. And it may just be worthwhile for this to go back to staff to come back with an option of maybe a couple of options of ways that we might sort of pull from a slightly wider pool for the award. So I think I'm hearing that sort of as a general intent. And then perhaps we'll just talk a little bit about, is there anything else on this? As noted, it doesn't have a lot in the way of criteria. Before the meeting, Councillor Green was just telling us about a nice little renovation of a house that we were so glad didn't get torn down and was renovated in the neighborhood. Not as architecturally meaningful, but a very nice. And that's a lot of the awards in the past have sort of captured those. So I think we've got to be careful not to look too grandiose on this. This is meant to capture in the past both small and large projects. Anyway, go ahead, Councillor Smart.
Oh, just hearing around the table some interest in involving the public in some meaningful way, but it absolutely not being controversial. I just wonder if, since the drawings of the up to 4 end up, I understand, also are a municipal hall, I believe. I wondered if maybe we might want to have like a People's Choice kind of award that people would come down and see and vote on People's Choice of the ones that were already selected. Just a thought.
It is getting complicated. There are often just one or two at the end of the day that are selected in these pieces, so it may be an odd at times to have one of one. Anyway, those are certainly all options. So just to move this forward a little bit, I'm hearing that there's a desire here to move this back to staff to come back with some options for ways of broadening that without adding a call to the public or anything else that's going to add enormous amounts of staff time, but could pull together a meeting and go through the nominations. And the second part of this is, right now we have a reasonably clear of specific conditions attached to it, and there was some discussion up to this body if there's a direction given to leave it as broad as it is, or do we act to try and create a comprehensive list of what would be considered as part of that would be the other option as part of that. So I think the one referral on this to staff to come back is the least controversial of option on this at this point, and then the other half I think we can deal with. So perhaps I can just look to either additional questions or
I think Mr. Coates has a proposed motion on the screen, which I will read. That council refer the draft policy back to staff to consider and provide options for additional public participation in the process from existing committees. I've moved it, yes.
moved and seconded. Thank you, Mr. Coates, for giving us a suggestion on the wording. Go ahead, Councillor Braithwaite.
Thank you. I'm obviously going to vote in favor of this, and I think we should keep the it broad the way it is. I actually quite like that. I think it leaves room for us to be able to make good choices from things things that come forward from the community or from the advisory design panel. So I think it's better to leave it as in a broad sense, I think, as far as our choice goes.
It's moved and seconded. Go ahead, Councillor Green. Say your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to add my comments in support to Councillor Patterson's notion of adding sustainability and environmental aspects as well. They are part and parcel of each of the committee mandates, but they're not overtly considered always. So I think that is a good idea. Thank you.
I'm going to deal with the motion that this refers to broaden the input, and then we can come back to perhaps that discussion on the policy. I appreciate I allowed that extra comment in there, but that's fine. So why don't we deal with this first? I think we have some general agreement on this piece. Is there any other discussion on this in terms of asking staff to bring back those options? I don't see any, so I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? Not opposed? And then there was a discussion here to I saw the typing going on the screen after that was done. Thank you. And then the other question, I'm just looking here for what is included in the current policy piece, which is very, very general in terms of so if there's a desire to see additional language added in there, maybe again, we could, the appropriate thing here would not be to wordsmith, but to direct staff to come back with some options, including environmental, I guess it would just be environmental pieces. So I'm going to look for a motion, if that's the will, and if there's a mover and a seconder of the intent, then I'll maybe get Mr. Coates to draft up a couple of words there. Is there a desire here on the part of the body to add some language on those lines? I'm seeing enough people nodding to, I think we should just get a motion up here. Mr. Coates, did you start something already? Okay. That's on the motion. So does the council request staff to report back with expanded options for consideration, including environmental and sustainability considerations for the award? So the motion, but I'm just going to go to you. Councillor Appleton is the mover. The council requests staff to report back to expanded options for consideration for the awards, including environmental and sustainability considerations. You indicated you wish to move something, and I think you indicated you wish to move something as well. Councillor Green, is that adequate? Or Councillor Patterson? It doesn't matter. We don't record the mover and seconder. I just need, if this wording is sufficient, if not. Go ahead, Councillor Patterson.
Just a comment, I don't, I'm in agreement with the wording, but I think that in the backgrounder, it did say the goal will be to present an award of recognition to an aesthetically pleasing project or for some other aspect, such as changes to a property that enhances the streetscape or the neighborhood, and we could simply have built on that to also recognize environmental and energy sustainability to that. So we capture it all. It's just adding more of a reminder that it's a broader category than originally anticipated. So, but I'm fine with that too.
I'm just going here because we have, if we can make a change in real time, that's often better than to have them come back. But I think we'll just make note of your comment. If you're okay with the motion as is, we'll just see if that language comes back in that format. So I'll just treat it as moved and seconded at this point. And then I had any speakers. So Councillor Braithwaite, you had a...
Yeah, I mean, I'm in agreement with this, but I also think, going back to something that Mr. Bull said, was that in a lot of our committees, we have those lenses and we have people specifically on those committees that have that background. And so I think that they would be the ones that we would want to choose then, if that's what we're looking for, to sit on this, on the Alan Cassidy award, recognition awards, because then they're going to look at that through that lens. And same with on Parks, Rec and Culture, we have people that are specifically either on that committee because they are environmentally, because they have an environmental background or something like that. So I think if we could look at that, that would be really helpful.
Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Watson.
Yes, through you, Mayor, I just then want to clarify amongst ourselves that if we are doing this, that really the policy criteria are really just the text in this policy statement that's at the top of the staff report right now. It's very open-ended language around what would be considered for an award with no additional criteria. So we want I'm just clarifying that what we're looking for is a broad statement that still gets at enhancement of streetscapes and neighborhoods and is cognizant of perhaps not just aesthetics, but also these other elements. Okay, so we're not asking staff to come back with additional policy criteria enumerated. Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Councillor Smart. I've got to be audible at home.
I'm of course supportive of environmental and sustainable leadership. My concern, I guess, is that it still is an and/or, just that it wouldn't now become a lens of exclusion, but one of broadening. And then if we are doing that, and this becomes a trickle down thing, but I guess putting in the word social to me would make sense, because there might be a project that socially improves the community from an inclusivity or a solving homelessness problem that we would want to celebrate. So I might just add the word social in there.
I don't have a motion for that change, so perhaps if that's what we desire, you may want to make a motion to amend this to include that language as well, and we can deal with that amendment. Yep, if we have just an original motion here, we can take an amendment on this motion as it stands, if that's your desire. Go ahead, Councillor Watson, or Councillor Smart.
Could I make a motion to amend the current motion to include environmental, sustainable, and social considerations?
Moved and seconded. Is there further discussion? I'm going to just speak against this motion, not because that isn't a laudable goal. I'm speaking against it because I think this is a very specific to buildings. And while those buildings may contain support for social pieces, they're typically, the building can be there and can change over time for different uses. Environmental is certainly part of the building envelope. The architecture design is part of the building envelope. The use of that might change significantly over time, and it would be hard to represent in a drawing on a wall as to what the social components would be. So I personally feel, as much as that's a value, I don't necessarily think that's appropriate for this award. I don't think it's reflected in the built structure that this is intended to analyze. So that's my own personal take of that. Not that it's not a super viable piece to have. I just don't know how it would tie in with this. You know, we can't cover everything with every award. I think this one is more to the built form. Councillor Green, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to comment that I think part of the social aspect is, a building that is easily accessible for those with mobility issues, buildings that provide inclusive programming for different and diverse aspects or individuals in our community. I will support the motion. Thank you.
Go ahead, Councillor Watson.
I'd like to follow up on Councillor Green's comments. I also will support the motion. I think that the social aspect comes into play, for example, in great gathering spaces. And if you wanted to celebrate one of those in communities, one of these awards might be quite appropriate. So I like the idea of having the typical three, the trio of values. Thank you.
Councillor Appleton, I had skipped over you at one point. My apologies.
No problem. Thank you, Your Worship. I just, and in as much as I'm in support of the language that is here, but I also note, I guess I would just draw council's attention to the original comments of Councillor Cassidy at the time, which are in the minutes, which say that no specific categories or criteria would be used in the evaluation process. The recipients would be decided upon as a good faith undertaking by a knowledgeable and caring panel, is what was the intent of the original. So not that this specific language detracts from that in any way, but from what I understand of the original motion and the original of Councillor Cassidy at the time was that I seem to get from that it was very intentionally left very broad to capture a number of different types of I think, and I would far be it for me to speak for Councillor Cassidy and his expertise, but I think that they may have had a similar discussion as we are now in saying that there's no need to unduly restrict what types of projects would be considered, and some projects, even though they're not large in scope, would be impactful for the neighborhood and impactful on their as a freestanding undertaking. So I think probably reflecting some of the difficulty of itemizing every potential type of project potentially resulted in this language. So just for reference, Your Worship.
All right, thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Smart.
Yeah, and I agree. I like keeping it simple, and I think that the conversation that's been happening here is around a little bit the fact that the project may not be pretty, and it does feel like the one restrictive part of the wording so far is that it must be pretty. And so I think I'm fine supporting no amendments, but if we are sort of amending in a and or may include fashion, I do like social.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Go ahead, Councillor Green. This is on the amendment to include in
I'll
social.
jump in one more time. I will support the amendment for social. And with all due respect to Alan Cassidy, that was 20 years ago. times have changed in society quite a lot, actually, in terms of what we value now and what we look at and what we consider. And I think the social aspects of governance are increasingly more important to decision makers. So I would only say that this reflects, I think, the current environment perhaps more accurately. And that's not to say that those criteria are not important. They are. I agree. But I think there's room to be flexible on this one. Thank you.
All right. Go ahead, Councillor Braithwaite.
Thanks. Interesting that Councillor Appleton brought that up, because I had read that when I was going through the package, and it just had left my mind, because I think it was really all-encompassing, those words. And knowing Alan Cassidy and sitting around the table with him for many years, he was kind of a visionary in those sort of things. And I think that he would be hopeful that we would leave the language loose so that we could include everything. So maybe this language is a little bit too restrictive. I'm really torn on this, because I want it to be very, very open, but I'm wondering if we use this kind of language, if it makes it a little bit more restrictive than what we want.
Thank you, Councillor Braithwaite. I'm going to jump in just because I think I'm one of the few who spoke against the end social. I've actually been convinced. I think the comment, especially both, I think the broader, if this motion passes, and this is an amendment right now, I think it should include the end social to be as broad as possible. I think that captures the intent of Alan Cassidy at first, so I'm supportive of that amendment for that reason. And also, I think, Councillor Watson, your point of the, what if this was a public space? What if this was a beautifully designed public space? How does that fit in to those criteria? And I think that is that's a rational argument to be made, that those social considerations could be included. So I'm reversing what I said before, and I'm actually going to support the addition of the and social. I'll yet to be convinced that the overall thing needs these changes, but if it is changed, I think the and social should be in there. Anything else on the and social? Go ahead, Councillor Patterson.
Yeah, just to speak a little more broadly to this, Mayor, it was my understanding that we were referring this back to staff to come forward with recommendations, and I anticipated in doing that research that they would have discussions with the various committees who have expertise within their ranks to actually do this, and to get feedback from those groups on, there may be more things, and I don't want to second guess the experts on what they will consider, but I think that after the staff do a reach out to those committees and get feedback from them, we may end up simply going back to the original with a very broad criteria, and the understanding from those groups with the expertise that they actually consider these and perhaps other things that we haven't thought of yet. So I don't want to belabor this point too much, because this was about referring the draft policy back to staff for their further analysis and a report back to council. So.
I think I'm ready to call the question on the amendment, which is to add the and social to the motion. All those in favor of adding those words? Any opposed? None opposed. That carries. So that we now have an amended motion that council requests staff to report back with these expanded options for consideration, to include the environmental, sustainability, and social considerations. As Councillor Patterson correctly pointed out, that would be a feedback piece. I just always, as much as it's always easy to refer things back, I want to make sure this is the intent, because it does take staff time and effort and everything else away from other projects when we're doing these things. So if this is the desire, then that's worthwhile. I just, sometimes I'm always afraid that things get referred by habit, and I don't want that to be the case. I think in this case it probably does merit that consideration. So the main motion here is to refer this back to, if those pieces can be included. Is there any discussion on this? Go ahead, Councillor Green.
Just really briefly, the word including in the previous motion is expansive. It really helps. It draws everything, and so as long as the word including is there, it leaves room for lots of other things. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Green. Councillor Appleton, and then Mr. Bull afterwards.
Your Worship, thank you. I was wondering whether or not it might be, and I don't know whether this needs to be done by motion or whether it's just direction to staff, but I was interested in having the language from the original council discussion that I just referenced included as part of the policy statement for our new document. Essentially capturing, without somebody having to dig through old minutes, as staff have kindly done for us in this case, to make specific reference to the language that I just used, saying specifically, and I think it's important for this policy document, referencing that no specific categories or criteria are used in the evaluation process, and that the recipients would be decided upon as a good faith undertaking by a knowledgeable and caring panel. I don't hear any disagreement with that being an underlying tenet of how the process is run, so I would like to see it included in the policy statement in the new policy.
Thank you. I'm going to call the question on this motion, and I think I will take a motion just to that effect, so it's very clear to give that direction if that's the will of council. So I have a motion right now to have the staff come back with expanded options as listed here. Any further discussion on this? All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. That carries. Councillor Appleton, I think a simple motion along the lines, Mr. Coates, you can think about this as well, a simple motion along the lines of that staff look to include the original wording from the original wording on intent from 2004 to be included in the policy as well as.
So moved, Your Worship.
Yep, so it's moved and seconded. No, it's just that wording isn't quite right. Include the original wording on the intent. The in. I'm just, Councillor Apple, did you have the point, the section of the original piece that was,
Yes, Your Worship. So referring to, this is the minutes of the September 27th, 2004 council meeting as appended to the staff report. This is on page 10 of 17 of our package. Under item 3 from those minutes, 2004-252, second paragraph. Comments from Councillor Cassidy in those minutes, indicating again that no specific categories or criteria would be used in the evaluation process and that the recipients would be decided upon as a good faith undertaking by a knowledgeable and caring panel.
is that clear then what we're talking about? Just to make sure that the language, okay. It just says no specific categories or criteria would be used in the evaluation. That's the wording that's in there, just so it makes it easy to reference. It's not policy consideration. Sure, I'll just say it's the just referencing that no specific categories or criteria would be used in the evaluation process. I think just that whole section, but just that. Yeah, that's perfect. For those who can't read it on the screen, it says that staff include the original wording from the September 2004 meeting minutes referencing Councillor Cassidy's comments that no specific categories or criteria be used in the evaluation process. And probably we have to include that and that. Sorry. I'm not letting myself come back here. And that it be decided as a good faith undertaking. Yeah, I think we just let the wording be brought in, but just that people reading this, yeah, good faith undertaking. Yeah, there we go. Not a God faith undertaking. That's a different requirement entirely. Okay, thank you for that. I think that's very clear about what we're referencing there. Moved and seconded. Is there any other discussion on that piece? All right, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. Thank you for that. I think that probably concludes our piece. Oh, Mr. Bowl, sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I have a follow-up question, I think, in terms of Councillor Pedersen's specific suggestion to refer this policy also to the committees or seek input from the perspective. We could bring something back first to council and at that time ask you to specifically refer it to the committees, or you could do it right away. Reviewing the policy is not necessarily in the scope of the committees at the moment, and it's not an application. And it does require some extra time to run it by the 3 committees, I take it, or maybe the 4. So that's something that I would appreciate council's direction on, either today or maybe later when this comes back to council. Anyway, council prefers. Thank you.
I'll, it's an interesting question, Mr. Bull, and it's a good one. This process, what we have in front of us, is actually subject to public input. We can take public input on how we manage this. So I'm assuming if it comes back to us, it'll have that same process. It may be sufficient for this just to make members aware, if they have interest in this, that they could provide us writing when it comes back to council, and we can consider any of that as part of our pieces. If we feel the need at that time, we can make specific referrals to the committees for input. I think that would probably be the best process. I think don't want to, I'm in danger of overcomplicating this. What is a fairly straightforward piece? So, okay, I'm seeing nods around the table. So I think that's a reasonable process. Councillor Appleton.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a follow-up question. What is the status of the 2021 Recognition Award?
Mr. Bull, something concrete.
So the Mayor, we have a report ready for this, and we are planning to bring that forward on January 23rd to the closed meeting.
Thank you. Very good. I don't think there's anything else unless there's any other matters arising from this. All right, so thank you very much. The next item does not have public input. In fact, the next 2 items do not. And then we move to the, so we just have the adoption of a streets and traffic amendment bylaw. We've done the first, second, and third reading previously, so we're looking for a motion to adopt. I would like a motion, someone to read the entirety of that into the record.
I'll move that the Streets and Traffic Bylaw number 4100 2000 Amendment Bylaw number 4831 2022 be adopted.
Second.
And seconded. Any discussion? Go ahead, Councillor Smart.
I'll just echo a comment that came up at the last time we were discussing this, but with regards to point number 3 on page 1 of 2, when it says that you cannot stop in the zone unless the vehicle is an electric vehicle and the electrical vehicle is being actively charged. My concern with that wording is just that it may potentially result in the enforcement of ticketing a lot of hybrid vehicles at the moment that they are full of a charge at the station. I'm not sure if there's really anything we can do about that, but I just want to highlight a current issue that can happen with regards to people getting ticketed even though their intent is to actively charge, but they didn't make it back to their car immediately at the point when their car is stopped charging.
Thank you. I thank you for that comment. I think as an enforcement issue, if that raises its head, I think we'll have to deal with that. But any other discussion on the bylaw that is in front of us for adoption? Go ahead, Councillor Green.
It's not directly related to the bylaw, but the question about charging for the municipal charging stations in the parking lot, I think that was raised a little while ago by Councillor Braithwaite and myself, and I just wondered if there was any update on that. Are we in fact enforcing charges for those electrical outlets? Thank you.
So the short answer right now is no, and my understanding is the new charging stations are a different company that allows us to charge for those pieces. Do we have an update on the ability to convert the ones that are in, the two that are in the parking lot at the municipal hall? Do we know, Mr. Coates?
Oh, Your Worship, we don't have that information at this time. I'm certain that staff can bring that back, though.
Thank you. Is there any other discussion on the adoption of the bylaw? I don't see any. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed? That carries. And thank you, Councillor Smart, for just flagging that. And I think we need to keep an eye on if it's causing us, enforcement issues, and we can consider the changing the rules within that. Moving on to item number 8.2, we have a DVP application for 772 Victoria Avenue. For those watching, may wonder why a development variance permit wouldn't have public input. This is a process where we evaluate the merits of the application. If we feel it has sufficient merit to go and get public input, then we send it out for official notification. And following that, it would come back to council with the public input and consideration. So with that, I'm not, Mr. Bull, are you providing the, there's Ms. McDougall. I think Ms. McDougall is online. Welcome to the meeting.
Thank you so much, Your Worship. Can you hear me okay?
Ken, thank you.
Perfect. So the District of Oak Bay has received a development variance permit application for 772 Victoria Avenue. The applicant would like to reduce the required minimum lot width from 15.25 meters in the RS5 zone to 13.77 meters, a reduction of 1.48 meters or 5 feet. And just really quickly, I'd like to highlight that there is a typo in the report with regards to this calculation. I believe it says 15.25. It says 15.24, and the correct number is 15.25. So I just wanted to highlight that out, and we will get that corrected. The applicant is proposing to subdivide and redevelop the lot into 2 single-family homes. Staff have reviewed the proposed development in context with the site and the surrounding area. The property is in a residential neighborhood and is directly bordered by St. Michael's University School. The surrounding area consists mostly of older single-family homes of varying sizes and designs, and those are located on narrow and deep rectangular lots most typically. The 2 new lots would generally be consistent with the subdivision plan and parcel layout of the surrounding area. Both new lots would exceed the minimum lot area requirements for the RS5 zone by approximately 30%, and a rezoning is not required. A reduction of lot width would not impact the side lot line setbacks, the way that the side lot line setbacks are applied. The amount of open space, therefore, between the neighboring houses and the proposed new houses would be the same when compared to 1 new building on the existing property under the RS5 zoning. You can see this kind of demonstrated in the conceptual streetscape shown in attachment number 3, just showing there that basically the side lot line setbacks are applied the same. The zoning bylaw sets out regulations that scale the permitted height of a principal building based on lot width, meaning that narrower lots have proportionally shorter buildings. Therefore, the proposed new development would result in 2 shorter and smaller single-family homes with additional open space in between them as compared to 1 larger single-family home. Overall, staff are satisfied that the requested variance maintains the general intent and purpose of the OCP, and apart from the variance requested, meets the use and regulations of the zoning bylaw. The application also aligns with the OCP's infill housing policy objectives. Based on the overall results of this review, staff considered the application to be supportable and ready for public notice to be given following council's consideration. Should council wish to move forward with authorizing the DVP, notification to adjacent property owners would be undertaken in accordance with the land use procedures and fees bylaw. In addition to that, the applicant has conducted some neighborhood consultation and provided support signatures from 6 neighboring parcels, which you can see there in attachment number 4. And that concludes my summary. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. McDougall. I'm assuming we have the applicants here with us today as well.
Hi there, my name is Louis Horvat. I'm with Zebra Design. I'm here to represent our clients for this project.
Thank
I'm
you,
happy
Mr.
to
Horvat.
answer any questions.
Yeah, no, thank you. Please, please stay on the line. If there's any questions, we'll come to you on this. We can take any questions here of staff or of the applicant before we get to the main question of the whether to move this forward for notification. Are there any questions of Mr. Horvat? Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Braithwaite, then Councillor Patterson.
Thanks very much. I hope this is an appropriate question. I noticed that in the staff report, it said on page 4 of 17 that the two parcels are going to each require a driveway opening across a boulevard, and that the driveways on private property may need to be reduced to meet the 25% paved surface area requirements. And when I was looking at the picture of the houses, it dawned on me that perhaps I'm not sure if that's the actual design of the houses, but if it isn't, then if the garages were closer together, then perhaps they wouldn't have to. They could use the same driveway, and then they wouldn't have to. They wouldn't have an issue with the paved surface area. It's just a question on whether or not that might be feasible.
I'll give that question to Mr. Horvat.
Sure. So these are just conceptual designs, so nothing's set in stone here. We just want to show how it would fit in the streetscape. Currently, there's no requirement to show a new single-family house on it for this application. We have looked at the potential for putting a driveway down the center, and maybe in the future that could be possible. But currently, we haven't studied that to an extent that we could say, yes, that's definite. So as far as the paving goes, it's a proportion to the front yard area. So I think based on our front yard area, or the look of our front yard area, we could likely get a driveway in at that 25% mark. But again, that hasn't been studied to the final details. So unfortunately, I can't definitely answer your question. But based on the look of the front yard area, I believe we can get our 25% maximum paving in the front yard.
Thank you. Councillor Patterson?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And just somewhat on the same line as Councillor Braithwaite's question, I'm just wondering if we have a comparative for total lot coverage allowed if the lots are subdivided compared to lot coverage that would be allowed if the lots were not subdivided.
Ms. McDougall, is there any change in the total lot coverage by subdividing or not subdividing? I appreciate we're not here to discuss the subdivision itself, merely the variance, but perhaps you could just give some edification if there's any difference in the net coverage.
Yeah, so I can speak to that a little bit for sure. The lot coverage would stay the same in the sense that the RS5 zone is not changing, and so therefore the total amount that's permitted will stay the same. In terms of an actual analysis of the what's proposed with the two new buildings versus what could be done under the maximum for one parcel, we have not done that analysis, so that is not included in the report.
Thank you for that, and thank you, Councillor Patterson. Go ahead.
Thanks. And just one follow-up on this. I noted that the elevation for should the lot be subdivided, that the elevation of the two dwellings is lower than what would be anticipated if it was not a subdivided lot. And I am wondering if we are, like other municipalities, considering that restricting roof elevation heights might adversely affect the depth of excavation for new developments, and particularly with some of our perspectives for infill housing, if it perhaps might benefit the community better to have lower levels that, while usable, also have the benefit of more natural light. And I just throw that out into consideration. I don't know if staff are discussing that with proponents as these proposals come forward, but it does make sense that perhaps getting more light to the lower levels is of greater advantage to dwellings going forward, and it could minimize the need for constant operation of things like sump pumps for the deep water table, and could even reduce blasting in areas of rock. So I put that out just to see perhaps if staff consider it at all.
So I'm going to just, we're here to discuss the variance on this one, and we're not talking about the buildings, so I'm not going to have that conversation. It's certainly part of the discussion around for infill and potentially zoning changes, but not here today for this applicant in front of us. Go ahead, Councillor Watson.
Yes, through you, Mayor, thank you, to Ms. McDougall. A couple of questions. One is, I'm not familiar with I don't know enough about what's inside the RS5 zoning permissions or other zones, but one question is, do we have any legally subdivided legal lots in Oak Bay that would have a frontage at 35 feet? So that's my first question. And my second one is, what is the zoning at next door at St. Michael's School? Is it institutional? And sort of in relation to that, I'm asking this question because there seemed to be some discussion a while back in the community about St. Michael's leaving that site. And I wondered if there's anything in play there in terms of redevelopment of the St. Michael's School site that we know of at the moment.
Ms. McDougall, do you want to tackle those? I'm happy to answer those questions if you wish.
Perhaps you could repeat question number 1 there, just to get further clarification from you.
The first question was whether there were any lots that are 35 feet in width, frontage, and the short answer is yes, there are some, very few, but there are a few, and they're typically lots that have been lots aligned in one direction, and then somebody subdivided them in the opposite direction, so there's sort of some sort of leftover bits of property that have been left behind. There's certainly none that have been established at that width.
Thank
And
you.
the second question,
It was regarding the St. Mike, the zoning at the adjacent lot to the north at St. Michael's Junior School.
so it's institutional, but they are undertaking a massive renovation right now, and so they're expanding and are probably due for completion in the next few months, so they're not moving anytime in the near future.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Are there any other questions of the applicant or staff on this? So I have a bigger question than just a variance for the applicant, if I may. We don't have a large number of these larger lots, Mr. Horvat, and I'm just curious, as we're undertaking our infill housing piece, it seems an obvious place when there's 14,000 square feet lot adjacent to a school, et cetera, and we're considering things like townhouses. Has the owner considered looking at this from a rezoning perspective to use this rather unusually large lot to look at some multifamily options for this? I appreciate it's a much longer process than a subdivision, but has it been considered? Because I think there's a lot of will on the part of council and the community to find these opportunities when they come up. So I appreciate you probably can't speak too much for the owner at this point, but I would love to hear if that has been considered. If there's anything we could do to encourage that being looked at more fulsomely.
Sure. So in this process, we haven't considered anything with higher density. I believe the city was approached some time ago and discussed this project initially, and it was supportable, so we decided to move forward with that. I'm not sure if there's any incentives that we could give to the owners of the property to consider increasing density. I guess that would be something that could potentially be discussed.
Yeah, thank you. And I mean, I can't speak on behalf of council because we haven't had a chance to discuss anything specific, but there's certainly been, we've had a pretty universal, direction to date to move forward on the infill and to look at opportunities as they arise. So I think that this seems to me to be an opportunity that if the owner's interested in considering it, that we should be looking at it as a potential project, just by the nature of it. I'm getting lots of nods around the table here. You probably can't see that. To look at looking at something innovative here to both for possibly as a test case for some of these types of gentle infill, but it's just such a substantive piece of property. They could put a lot of units of townhouse and have it still fit within the sort of floor area ratio that we're used to in single family houses here. So I'll throw it to you. I don't think honestly that the ask of the variance is unreasonable. I think it certainly has the merit of going out to public input. So I'm supportive of the motion that's being proposed here. But I would ask perhaps that you maybe bring back to the owners, if they would be interested in looking at it, that perhaps a bit more look be done at considering rezoning this into a different use, and looking at how we might be able to facilitate that in the short term.
Sure, I can definitely take that to the clients and see what they have to say.
Thank you for that.
I'll move receipt.
Thank you. We have moved and seconded receipt. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed?
I'll move the recommendation from staff. That notice be given of council's consideration of development variance permit DVP 00126 for the property located at 772 Victoria Avenue.
Mover and a seconder. Moved and seconded. Thank you. Any other discussion? Go ahead, Councillor Watson.
Yes, just before I make the remark that I might make, are we allowed to comment on this application right now, or does that only allowed if it went to the public and then came back? Or what's the extent of the things that we can engage in right now around this application?
Sure, fair enough. What's being considered here would council consider a variance on the lot width on frontage? So our primary focus is on that. However, it's better for us to consider if there's comments that might be considered as part of council deciding whether or not to give preliminary consideration of this and notification. Those are always welcome, because obviously if that was to be raised later, we would have gone through a notification process for something that may have swayed our mind. So comments are generally better to be made than not made.
All right, then I will proceed to make a comment. The reason I asked the question about St. Michael's School is it's good for me to hear that we have an institutional use staying there, and it adds validity to your suggestion that on this lot, especially given its size, we should be doing something different. And I would be reluctant to approve what's being proposed right now when we could get something a lot better in terms of meeting our housing needs and addressing our infill housing strategy. I think that unlike the last application we had for a DVP, which was the property on Hampshire, where the applicant had already done a lot of work and they were coming back after a lot of time and effort and engagement. In this case, this is still preliminary, and I would really like to encourage, I think if we said yes to this, we've lost an opportunity where we really could be proactively with the owner's involvement doing something that really spoke to a good project that increased the density of this lot fairly significantly. So that's where I feel about this right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. I think it's helpful for the applicant to hear from members of council on that sort of piece, because obviously for any additional work, it's additional work, money, time, etc., for even consideration. So I think your comments are appreciated here as part of that. This would, if approved, obviously the variance does not change the fact that that application could be made, but I think this is the point of this conversation right now, is just to reflect the desire for some higher and better use for some of these pieces of property. So the motion right now is to send this out for notification. I don't see other hands. I will call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. One opposed. Councillor Watson opposed. And I just want to just share with you, Mr. Horvath, this will now go for notification. As we were speaking here at the table, it's hard to see in that little screen the things here. Everybody was nodding in agreement that this would be a better use as a higher density piece of property. So I just take that as you will. I think there's a lot of will here to see some other options being brought forward. So hopefully we'll see some other potential options being considered as well. We'll leave that in the hands of you and your client.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And yes, thank you. There's nothing else specifically on this item to deal with, so we're going to move on to item number 9.1. This is a notice of motion from Councillor Appleton. This is really in two parts. So we have, you don't have to read it into the record or anything at this point, but perhaps Councillor Appleton, there's two motions here. Perhaps I think if you can do it however you want. You can talk to one, and we can deal with that, or we can talk to it as a whole, and we can deal with them. Still want to deal with them a bit separately, but go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. It may be useful for council to discuss the two components separately. Potentially, the council may approach their decision making differently on those two items. So that's to your discretion, obviously, to sever those two things. But my intention in bringing forward this notice of two components that are related to one another, but could be considered separately or acted upon separately. They don't necessarily directly, there is some interdependence, but not directly one dependent on the other.
I'm happy with that. If you wish to just, if you have a motion here, but I think you probably want to just speak in general terms to both pieces. So why don't you go ahead and motivate, and then we'll get to discussion.
Thank you, Your Worship. Does this need to go onto the floor before I do so?
That's a good point. We have two motions here, so perhaps we can move one motion onto the floor, and then we have something to just speak to. We can make comments as well as questions. So why don't you move the first portion of that, if that's okay, for the 515?
Yes, thank you, Worship. I would move the first portion of my recommendation with regards to preparing options for potential amendments with respect specifically to in-camera meetings.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. Thank you. So go ahead, Councillor Appleton.
Thank you, Your Worship. So just speaking specifically to this component of the of my motion, our experience has been, or at least my experience has been, since the in-camera meetings were rescheduled to the 5:15 time, that it has been challenging to complete the business in an in-camera meeting in time for the set 6 o'clock start date for regularly scheduled meetings. And sometimes those meetings will extend to after the regularly scheduled meetings, which essentially detracts, I believe, from the original intent of the direction from council at the end of 2021 to limit the length of meetings and to manage the length and volume of meetings. So in my view, the 5:15 time has not fully accomplished that. Council will recall that both at that time and then subsequently to that, there have been discussions about potential other options for scheduling of in-camera meetings, but those haven't really been explored to this point. Also noting that not that we are clear of the COVID pandemic by any means, but certainly the nature of the conversation at that time, at the end of 2021, was very much colored by many years of hybrid meetings, online meetings, Zoom, and what we were going to be able to do and not do as far as in-camera or as far as in-person or hybrid meetings. Which the nature of which has changed somewhat in that intervening year and a bit. So I believe that at this stage of the game, it's a good idea for staff to evaluate some options as to how in-camera meetings could be scheduled, either as standalone meetings or with different timing associated with a regularly scheduled meeting in order to both manage the length of time of those meetings and to give time for a more fulsome discussion during in-camera considerations. Thank you, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you. And can you just maybe just for our courtesy in your mind, because I think at the end of the day we have to determine sort of a mix of things, then a preference just personally on that, on the in-camera piece, and perhaps a little bit of an argument on the 7 p.m. start time. I'm assuming you're looking at preferring some other start time than 5:15, and that would lead to the change to the 7 o'clock. Is that correct?
Well, thank you, Your Worship. I guess if we're talking specifically about to my mind, ideal options for the in-camera meeting, I guess I can keep it as simple as possible, which was, to my mind at least, the previous layout or the previous timing of in-camera meetings, still before regular meetings, but with the regular meeting beginning at 7. Essentially, the historical practice, I believe, actually provides the best option. But that is for council to decide. But if you're asking for my opinion as to what represents the best timing option, the historical timing option that was in place before this change was made at the end of 2021 is my preference.
Thank you. And just for the record, that has changed a few times. When I came on council, it was committee, and then we'd have in-camera after the council meeting would happen. I think it's important to note here that we're talking about the regularly scheduled in-camera, which has been only recently. That is a new piece. Mr. Coates, I think before we get too far into this discussion, it might be worthwhile to remind us what the intent of the regularly scheduled in-camera is for versus, say, special in-camera meetings or other more meaty, because these are obviously, as they're laid out right now, not intended to be long. So what is the purpose of these regularly scheduled, and why have regularly scheduled at all?
Thank you, Your Worship. So, and I'll do my best with this because a lot of these changes occurred prior to me joining the district, and my experiences with them are a bit varied and fairly small in scope. But certainly from a notice point of view and a clarity and a transparency point of view, that having regularly scheduled in-camera meetings tells the public that that's going to happen, and they can certainly be canceled if there's no business to take place at those meetings. And what it does is it sort of reduces the burden, the administrative burden on providing additional notice of meetings. Special meeting notifications are a little bit more rigorous than regular meeting notifications, and as you're all well aware now, that we publish annually the schedule of regular meetings, so that the administrative burden is less in that sense. Now, in terms of operationally what that looks like in terms of agendas and items of business that are being put on those closed meetings, I've certainly, so I have to be straightforward and say that I've seen a number of different approaches used in this few months that I've been with the district. My understanding is more typically that they were for smaller items that could be dealt with more quickly, and that when there was a larger issue, and I'm qualifying that because that's not exclusively the case, but typically my understanding was that if there was a larger issue, that it was evident that it was going to take more than 45 minutes to go through that type of business, that would be scheduled at a different time. So that said, we've, in my time here, have done it both ways and hoped maybe at times to get through and weren't successful getting through, and then having to either tack it on the end of after the closure of the open meeting or pick another date to do that. And I think I captured all of the essences of your question there on that. And so I think the biggest thing is that it varies, and the attempts are to try to flag those items. But as you're aware, all members of council, that we can't always foretell what the discussion might look like, and so it's not a perfect world.
No, I appreciate that. I think as we discussed this in the past, it was largely looking at things like, if there was a legal opinion that might reflect on the agenda items later in the day, if there's appointments to commissions that we might want to rise and report on in the later evening, those sorts of pieces were sort of intended for those sort of smaller, regularly scheduled meetings. I appreciate we possibly have abused that a little bit as we tried to cram in more things into those meetings, but the intention is sort of on a regularly scheduled piece. So thank you. And thank you, Councillor Appleton, for the overview. I'm going to allow conversation on all aspects of this, because I think it's a sum of the parts, right? Both the in-camera and the main meeting start times, et cetera, are related, and I think we should consider them together. So I just think I'm going to allow a fairly open conversation to happen here, because I just want to have that sort of feeling of where people are comfortable. And I'll go back to you in a second, Councillor Appleton. I don't know if this is, when we circulated this, the in-camera portion last time, my memory of it was that And the recommendation that came in that report was to do it at noon the day of. So we just do it a virtual meeting at noon. But it should have had to work for everybody, and my recollection was there was one counselor no longer on council that was unable to make that work, and so that was not considered any further. And I think that's, at the end of the day, is going to be people have to look at their own, calendars and times availability to see if something like that might work for us. And I guess that would be the gist of this report coming back. But I think that little history is interesting because it was almost noon at that time, but wasn't quite. So we ended up on the 5:15. Sorry, back to you, Councillor Appleton.
Thank you, Your Worship. I appreciate that. And further to Mr. Coates's point, I just wanted to reiterate that as per and maybe the language could have been a little bit more precise, but as it does refer in the in-camera portion of the recommendation, it does specifically relate to the current recurring 5:15. So this does specifically relate to this. So just so council is clear, the implication here is not to delete or alter the aspect of having a regularly scheduled in-camera meeting. The subject at hand is the specific timing of it. I appreciate Mr. Coates's comments because it may be that should council support the options analysis that's laid out here, it may be that staff could also include at that same time potentially options for the necessity for additional standalone in-camera meetings to address the sort of the timing of some of the regularly scheduled meetings. In that, potentially we could save time on the recurrent in-camera meeting by scheduling an additional standalone meeting to deal with larger matters. It seems like larger matters potentially have come before that into that regularly scheduled component. So I guess I would not restrict consideration of in-camera meeting options in an analysis exclusively to just the language that I've included here, if that makes sense, Your Worship.
Fair enough. And I think at any point when we have to have a meeting, we have to have a meeting, and we'll always do that. I think the primary consideration here is a regular recurring piece of it, but you're correct. I think any options analysis would have to sort of say, but if we're going to have other meetings, when would those happen? So I'm going to go, and again, I'm just looking to, a lot of this is sort of what works for, again, consideration is what's the impact on members of council, what's the impact on the public, and what's the impact on staff. Everything has pros and cons. I don't want us to be thinking, well, this is you're wrong or anything else. This is just, let's consider all the pros and cons of this and try and find a path forward. Go ahead, Councillor Smart.
I appreciate you bringing this forward. It's in looking at the different options, I guess I really appreciate the idea of having the meeting a bit later to be more potentially inclusive of families attending council meetings. So I do like that aspect of considering a later time, that it might make it easier for those coming home from work and then wanting to participate from the public. Yeah, I just wanted to mention that I would find it challenging. I know we have two separate motions ahead of us here. I would find it challenging to agree, though, on moving the meeting time till 7, not knowing what the other piece of the puzzle was as far as those other meetings. And I personally would find it quite challenging to have meetings at noon. So I just want to mention that.
Thank you. I think that's exactly the kind of comments we're looking for here right now, is to get a sense of things. Go ahead, Councillor Patterson.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And I appreciate Councillor Appleton bringing this forward. I did express concerns when we initially considered changing the start time of the meeting, primarily because we were doing it late in the council term, and I thought that it might reflect poorly. But now that we have made the decision and we've tried the earlier start times for meetings, I am wondering what input, if any, we have received from the public, and if it would be appropriate to do a reach out to the public to, now that we've tried both start times, the 7 o'clock and the earlier start time, to get the feedback from members of the community. It's been very difficult to gauge what the public thinks about it, because with pandemic, nobody was attending in person, and in fact, we seem to have more people on when we were doing the remote meetings compared to what we've had since we've come together at council. So, you know, I I think that we're really limiting ourselves if we don't take the opportunity to do a reach out to the community and get some feedback from them on what has been working. Although I do, for the community, although I do appreciate Councillor Smart's remarks that certainly the earlier start time could be challenging for those who work and also have a family to attend to before they come to council meetings. But I feel that we're having this discussion with really not a lot of feedback from the community on what has worked better for them. And I'm wondering if staff has any idea of how that could be achieved, or how time consuming it would be to do a quick survey for the community.
I think that would be, we would have to go and ask staff what that would look like, or some options for that, because I think that would be too much to ask in one swell here. But Ms. Williams, do you have anything you wish to sort of throw in 2 cents on right now?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just to basically what you had just mentioned, that we can go out and talk to our communications team and find out what other outreaches are we doing at present, because we're worried about taxing our residents with surveys, and we've certainly had a lot in the past 6 months. But depending on the timeline that council wants to implement a new schedule, we could certainly find out how long it would take and how much time would we need to get some good data back.
My only comment on that would be, I think it's easier to go forward if we're looking at changes, to go forward with some suggested changes and ask for feedback on that, because again, the sum of the parts is probably the key thing on this. Mr. Coates?
Thank you, Worship. And just to follow up on Ms. Williams' comments too, and these issues are built right into the council procedures bylaw. And so when council contemplates changes to that, there's a mandatory consultation with the public and advertising of any proposed changes as a means that's required before council can adopt the bylaw. So, timing is everything in relation to when public input is sought, but certainly in that process, you essentially can't make the final decision without it.
Thank you very much. I have Councillor Green and then Councillor Watson.
Thank you very much, and I've appreciated all the comments, and also appreciate Councillor Appleton bringing this forward. And I think it was a good thing to try something differently, and we've done that. My biggest concern is that we have not had, as Councillor Patterson points out, fulsome participation by our community as of late. Certainly the last 3 years have been very diminished, and it worries me. I think I said that about the campaigning issue as well, that I'm not sure any of us can actually say that we have a really firm understanding of what's happening at the community level around these kinds of issues. I counted that 4 of 7 of us work full-time. I think that's a consideration at the moment, and I do believe that it is important for families and people who work full-time to have equal access to our meetings if they choose to come or Zoom in. And I think the 6 o'clock start time is the dinner hour, essentially. And more we know that family time together over a meal is important to a lot of families, and a lot of families regardless of whether or not they have children. But I think it's doubly hard when you have young children as well. So I guess my goal is to ensure that we're meeting the needs of our community adequately around this issue of meeting times. But I would certainly support a change, but I was anxious to hear from my colleagues tonight. But I would be supportive of a change to a later time. And the old schedule of 6 o'clock and 7 o'clock wasn't dreadful, I don't think. But again, I don't know that. It's been a long time since we've had direct feedback about meeting times. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Councillor Watson.
Yes, thank you, everybody. Just to add my own perspective here, I am really open to whatever works for the most people, and I'm happy to accommodate whatever that is. But I just wanted to clarify that we're not at all talking about changing the day here. We're just talking about changing the time. Is that correct? Okay, good. So then I wonder, given what Mr. Coates has explained to us about the reason for the regularly scheduled in-camera meeting, it seems to make sense to have that always already done because it eliminates need for special notice if the meetings aren't already in place. And I wondered from an efficiency point of view, if there was a reversion to the 7 o'clock time, if then the regularly scheduled in camera just wouldn't be at 6:15. Because I mean, I've attended a few of these so far, and in the business we've had for those meetings, we've had enough time in that 45 minutes to do what we needed to do, and then moved into the council meeting. So, but I guess my overall point is I'm happy to do what's desired by the most people. So I'm easy peasy between 6 or 7 or 5:15 or 6:15. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Braithwaite.
Thanks, Mayor. Really interesting conversation. I think that there's a couple of things that I would note. I like the fact that we, and I listen to what staff says about the aspect of having notice provisions for a regularly scheduled in-camera meeting. I think when we do have regularly scheduled in-camera meetings, it saves a lot of staff time for having to do them of one of, et cetera, et cetera. So I like that. I personally don't mind the 5:15 time. I understand that it can be harder for others. I think that the reason I don't mind the 5:15 time is and I'll use today as an example. Today we were finished within 5 minutes. It wasn't an onerous meeting. If we needed to have a meeting on, say, if we were doing something, I don't know, if some building wanted to get put in Oak Bay and we had to have in-camera meetings on it, we would have a special in-camera meeting, and we would schedule that for a Thursday night normally. So as far as that goes, I'm okay with the 5:15 time. I understand that it can be a struggle for others. And the second reason I like the 5:15 time is that for staff, it's a lot much easier, I think, for that staff to stick around from 4:30 to 5:15. And so the impact that timing has on staff is important to me. And then also, and I'll use our last meeting where we're supposed to discuss this item as an example. When we don't start till 7 o'clock, if we go for 4 hours, that's 11 o'clock. And I know there's people around this table who are not going to be able to stay awake at 11 o'clock. I mean, honestly, there's people who would much prefer to be out of this building by 10. Sometimes we have meetings that go 4 hours or longer. If we're starting at 7, that's going to get us out of here at 11. For people who work the next day, that can be a hardship. If we start our meetings at 6 and it's a 4-hour meeting, we're getting out of here at 10, it's a little bit better. And it's a little bit better for staff as well, and a little bit better for the public. So I'm really torn on this because I've lived the 7 o'clock meetings. I've lived where we had the in-camera meetings always after our regularly scheduled meetings, and sometimes they would go till 1 o'clock in the morning because we wouldn't finish our regularly scheduled meeting till 11. So it's going to be hard to come to consensus, I think, on this, but I do agree that we should have input from the public. I think we do need to meet the needs of the community, but and our staff and ourselves. So for me, if I stay up till 1 o'clock in the morning anyhow, so it doesn't matter to me if we're here until 1 o'clock in the morning. I'm okay with that. But for others, I know that makes it harder the later that we have to stay here. So that would be my comments on that, I think. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you, Councillor Braithwaite. I probably shouldn't have made a jokingly indication that I couldn't stay up till 11, but I probably can. I'll make a couple comments and I'll go back around the table here. So, where I sit on this one, and I think, there is, every time you trade off one piece of, allowing for more people to have dinner, then you're pushing into the issues that raised there about that, and vice versa if you're moving. And so there's no right answer here. So I'll just sort of where I'm at on this, because things have changed quite a lot over the last few years. One, I would love to see us have our in-camera during the day sometime beforehand. I think it would allow a gap so that if there's a 5-minute meeting, we're not, having everybody around when we don't need it. We can do that. The virtual technology works well for those sort of short meetings. They're primarily directed at the more procedural pieces or perhaps educational or legal updates, those sorts of things that I think are quite valuable. And we can do those virtually quite effectively. So I would love to find a time in the daytime to do it. I appreciate the comment from Councillor Smart that that may not work, and that's fine. That's what happened last time as well. But if that's possible, I think it really facilitates that ability to get, say, a legal opinion that then when we're going into the meeting, we've had time to think about it and can consider it as part of our piece. I do think that personally, I kind of prefer the 6 o'clock time frame if we're not meeting at 5:15. I find the 5:15 tight. It's very difficult to kind of squeeze in food or other pieces of that, and if you have kids, it's very difficult, and it's tough. I think the 5:15 I have found quite difficult, so I would prefer to have that. But I think the 6 o'clock start time for me, I think, is a reasonable compromise, and one of the reasons I say that is I find that at some point you're sort of waiting for the meeting to start at 7, whereas at 6 it feels like we're kind of continuing with the connections to previous work times. Also, just by the very nature of it, most of our applicants are coming in virtually. People are watching online. That first, if it's a 6 o'clock start time and people are still eating at that point, they're often just sort of there watching the procedural pieces until their application item or piece comes up. And I think, frankly, just the fact that we have seen a dramatic shift of people from attending in person to attending virtually. And I think we have to just recognize that that changes the necessities that we have in this chamber as well. And I have a really significant problem where I've seen real problems with the in-camera is where we, have had to say, we start at 5:15, we can't quite get through everything in that time, and we have a long meeting. Well, we're asking staff to sort of hang around for those 3 or 4 hours to come back and provide us information at the end of that. And it's almost an impossible ask of people to kind of do that when there's no clear timeline. Where at least if it was in the daytime and we ran out of time, we could at least say, well, okay, at least schedule your schedule to come back after this or before the meeting or something, and those sort of pieces. So to my mind, I think the virtual nature of the way that we can meet and the way that the public can participate changes the calculus for me a little bit. If we were going to keep the front to back, I would probably support the 6 o'clock in camera, 7 o'clock council time, because I think we need a little bit more breathing room, and I think that's a piece, because I'm not a fan of the 5:15 start time. I have found it quite onerous and difficult for people often sprinting in here at the very last second and so forth. But my preference would be that we find some mechanism to do a daytime in camera that makes it easier if we have lawyers or other people to do it on their hours. It makes it easier for staff if they're just providing those advice, and then we can just deal with the regular meetings and those pieces. And if they're council, it's even easier. So that's where I'm kind of landing on this. My mix. But I appreciate I think what we're doing here is teasing out the pros and cons of the various approaches, and that's the secret to making a decision. So, I think personally, from a procedural pieces, I would probably prefer that both the 7 p.m. start time and the considerations for changes to the in-camera both be referred to staff and come back with the options for both, personally. Because I think just giving the direction at 7 without knowing what our options are in the in-camera, I struggle with a little bit. Councillor Green, you indicated you wish to speak for a second time.
Yeah, I just wanted to make an observation, and it's probably heresy, and don't panic anybody, but when the meetings were changed from 4 a month to 3, I was concerned about that because I think that was done in the 2011 council term, my first term in Oak Bay, by the then mayor, and I expressed my concern at the time because this work has become much more complex and much more onerous. And having lost that one meeting a month, I think has had an impact on the workload and an impact on the agenda load as well. Bay. Now, obviously, I'm sure there's very little appetite to resurrect the 4th meeting a month, but I think many other jurisdictions do continue to meet four times a month, and it just spreads the load. It shortens meetings. It provides some more breathing room. I'm not suggesting we do that, but it's just I just wanted to make those comments. So don't panic, everybody.
Well, I don't think it's definitely not heresy, and I'm going to just I'm going to bring the staff back into this conversation a little bit on this, because I think one of the things that we've had some discussion about is managing meeting times, and the way that as we moved things around from the procedures bylaw, and we're finding more things landing on council and fewer on committee of the whole. Looking at sort of building in more hybrid with a sort of a combination of a council / committee of the whole meetings to to allow for some of that spreading out of services. So I don't think it's heresy. I think we have an obligation to look at how we're managing our meetings in a way that allows us to do good work within 3 hours. I think bottom line is once we get past 3 hours, especially past 4 hours, we're not making good decisions, right? It's just very hard to stay in and keep that kind of level of focus. So that's those sort of discussions, that we can make those changes as we go, but I think it's really important for us not to be so beholden to a structure that we're not able to get good work done. At the same time, we also want to be able to publish our meetings on for years ahead, so that people have some sense of when we're meeting. So if they're interested, they can come and attend and watch and so forth. So thanks, Councillor Green. Go ahead again.
And I really appreciate the comments. Thank you, Mayor. And also, I also am concerned about how we utilize staff time and in terms of length and the onerous nature of the work. So I agree with Councillor Braithwaite on that score as well. But I think for me, it's just that I think because we've been lacking the community input that we were used to in Oak Bay prior to COVID, it's been a tough adjustment not to have that voice in the room. And so that's just my comment there. Thank you.
Thank you. It has definitely changed the nature of things that we'd love to have more people. If you're watching, feel free to come in and join us in the chambers. Go ahead, Councillor Smart.
At the risk of adding more options to the table, I just wonder, since there's such good arguments on both sides, if a compromise of the in-camera at 5:30 and the council meeting at 6:30 might be something to consider. I believe there is another municipality that meets at 6:30.
I was thinking of suggesting that. I'm like, it's probably not. I think if there's an options analysis piece that comes back, that'd probably be one of those things to consider, because those sort of hybrids or more models might work for us. But did I see another hand? So we have a motion on the floor for options analysis at the 5:15 start time for the in-camera portion. Not seeing any other discussion on this. I think hopefully the discussion around this table has been helpful to staff as they bring back some options analysis as part of that. I think I found it certainly very interesting and thoughtful in terms of some of those pieces. So, all right, I'm happy to call the question on that. I certainly look forward to having this discussion with that information behind us. All those in favor? Oh, sorry, Councillor Watson, I thought I saw you raise your hand there to speak before I did.
I did. Just a question about that first motion. I'm not going to move to amend it, an amendment to it, but given what we heard around this idea of having an in-camera meeting after the regularly scheduled council meeting, that didn't sound like it went down well with anybody. Just wondered if it would be a friendly amendment to remove that possibility from the motion. So that would reduce the scope of what the staff would be reporting back on. So an in-camera meeting to a separate standalone time, either not in association with a regular scheduled meeting. I would remove the taking place after a regular meeting.
I think if I might just make a suggestion on that before I get a seconder for it, is just, and I'll seek a seconder if people wish, but just the options analysis piece, I think if nothing else might just raise the flags of what might cause problems with. If we don't have it in there, we might not be able to have it included in the report. So I'd be leery of excluding it on that basis, but I think those concerns would be there. But is there a seconder? Was there a seconder? Did I see a seconder hand go up for that? No. Okay. So is that sufficient, Councillor Watson? Okay. And Councillor Appleton, you wanted to speak to it?
Just as the person who made the motion, Your Worship, I guess my expectation would be, and the language is potentially a little clunky here, I will recognize that, but I've got full faith in, when we say we're going to ask staff for an options analysis, that staff will analyze all the options and the particular permutations. That was the intent of it, not to restrict it to any one particular time.
Thank you. So the motion is on the floor. If it passes, we'll get a report back from staff on those options for the regularly scheduled in-camera. Seeing no further discussion, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. And the second portion of this, Councillor Appleton, do you want to make the second motion on this piece?
Well, thank you, Your Worship. So the second part of this motion is moving that regularly scheduled council and committee of the whole meetings be returned to a 7 p.m. start time.
Is there a seconder for that motion? I'll second it for discussion. Yeah, thank you. Councillor Appleton, your chance to motivate.
Thank you, Your Worship. I appreciate that. And I very much appreciate the comments of my colleagues to this point, sort of capturing what the motivation is for this. And I think we've already touched on some of the conceptual pieces of why, you know, this is important to consider. I guess what I would motivate at this stage of the game, and what I would make a point of mentioning to council is that my primary and overriding interest in bringing forward the change to timing is to address lack of public engagement. It is the key and driving factor in my bringing this forward. Rather, not that the logistical components for both staff and council members themselves aren't significant. They do factor into that, but we have returned to in-person council meetings, but we haven't returned to our previous levels of in-person participation. You know, it is a very, very quiet council chamber, and it doesn't sit well with me. And I would like to see folks feel engaged and plugged into that process. We saw in the most recent municipal election a significant drop-off in engagement, in voter turnout, and just engagement more broadly. COVID obviously has something to do with that. But I believe that it's time for council to cast their minds to those things, anything that we can do to reduce barriers to public participation. And to get people in, asking us questions, holding us accountable, and being there to plug into municipal process. So I really, the overarching and overriding motivation to do this is based in that. I do think that 7 p.m. provides, as has been mentioned already, provides a better opportunity for a broader range of folks to be able to make it to meetings. 6 o'clock is the dinner hour, and I believe that there are a number of people out there that forego the opportunity to participate because it's just because of the timing. And the online option does provide a way for people to plug in, but I would take note of, like, for instance, on tonight's meeting, in terms of the timing of the procedural elements for tonight's meeting started at 6 o'clock. The public engagement portion of the agenda was up and through by about 6:15. So that's still very early in the evening. So that's of concern to me. I think that, and further to some of the points that have been made already, I don't deny that meetings running until 11, 12 o'clock at night are not productive. I think that we need to revisit and remind ourselves as a council of what was included in the most recent procedures bylaw amendments in terms of limiting meetings to 3 hours, you know, putting that specification in there. Those 3-hour limitations, I recognize that that's important. That number is there for a reason. It's to ensure that the meetings don't run too long, they're not onerous for staff, that good decision making happens. So that I think that it is not just a discussion about when the meetings start, but council committing themselves to a conduct of business that can put ourselves into that 3-hour time frame more often than not. So just the idea of starting at 7 to me doesn't immediately equate to an 11 o'clock end time, because I think that this council is committed to dispensing its business in a timely and efficient fashion, and committing to fit within those 3-hour blocks. So I think that that's an important step forward. So I just want to reiterate that my primary concern here with the 7 o'clock start time is to engage more people. Further to Councillor Patterson's point, I agree that public engagement on the start time would be desirable. It's a bit of a chicken, to my mind, it's a bit of a chicken and egg type of concept, because the folks that we're looking to engage with a later start time are potentially not plugged into the process enough to engage in a input process to talk about what time they would prefer. I honestly feel that those folks may have orbited away from civic process and may not be monitoring their engagement opportunities the way that they would normally. And as staff have pointed out, there's a little bit of fatigue setting in as well about asking questions of the public. So I really value Councillor Patterson's comments. I'm concerned that the folks that we're trying to reach with and trying to engage through a later start time may not respond to a public and so I did consider that when making the motion, and this is part of the reason why it's essentially presented as a time change now rather than a recommendation to go to the public. Not that I don't care about that aspect, but because I feel like we need to make that decision in advance, and as staff have mentioned, it would represent a change to the bylaw and we'd have to consult with the public in any case. So that's why it's presented this way. I appreciate your letting me detail that, Your Worship. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Appleton. Councillor Braithwaite, and Councillor Patterson.
Thank you so much, and thanks for your comments, Councillor Appleton. I think that the reason that we have a quiet chamber is because of the effects of COVID, and I think that we made it pretty clear to people not to come to the hall during when COVID was bad, and we made it onerous for them to come to the hall to protect people. But I think that right now, sadly, we're kind of going back into a protection mode, I think. So whether or not we get people coming into the chambers or not, I'm not sure. But hopefully, as people are more comfortable and feel less threatened by COVID, they will then come back to the chambers. I sadly cannot support the 7 o'clock time start right now, only because I want to see what comes back from the first part of the motion, to see what discussion we have or what decisions we make around the in-camera. So then, depending on what happens with that, then perhaps I would be able to support a 7 o'clock time. I do think that your comments around the 3-hour time frame for meetings, yes, it would be wonderful if we could stick to those 3-hour time frames for meetings. But let's face it, sometimes on the agenda, items take a lot longer than what we think. For example, tonight, the very first item on the agenda I thought was going to take 15 minutes. It took almost an hour. When you have agenda items, if somebody has been waiting in this chamber from 7 o'clock until 10 o'clock for their item to come up, and their item comes up, I'm not going to say I'm going to refuse to extend the meeting so that their item isn't, after they've waited for 3 hours. I can't see myself doing that, saying, well, I don't want to extend the meeting because we're at the 3-hour limit. I'm pretty sure that all of us are going to be looking at this person who's been sitting there for 3 hours going, yes, we should deal with their item because they've been sitting in this chamber for so long. So right now, I can't support the 7 o'clock time start. Once the information comes back from staff, then I'll definitely keep an open mind on whether or not, and listen to my colleagues around the table as to whether or not that time frame would fit better. I still feel a 6 o'clock time is better right now, but until I hear what's coming back from the other report, I can't support the 7 o'clock time right now. Apologies.
Thank you, Councillor Braithwaite. We don't need to apologize. We're just things. But anyway, I have some potential suggestions on this one, if depending on where this is sitting. Go ahead, Councillor. Sorry, I have Councillor Patterson, then I have Green, and then I have Watson.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Appleton, for clarifying his intent, and I appreciate Councillor Braithwaite's remarks also. I do think that what staff come back with for in-camera is important, but I think it will be influenced by the start time for meetings. And if we change the start time to 7 o'clock, that will give them an option for suggestions regarding the in-camera. Appreciating staff's comments also about fatigue by the community of surveys. I think I'm persuaded by Councillor Appleton's desire to move the meetings back to 7 o'clock to determine if it does encourage participation at council meetings, which I think is really what we strongly desire to achieve. And so then I can support changing them to 7 o'clock to test the waters, to see if it provides us with better input from the public, and there's a good response to that. And hopefully there will be. If there isn't, well, then we'll have other decisions I'm before us perhaps to follow that. So I think that given that the motivating factor is greater public access to our meetings and participation and interest in the business of council, I will support the change to the 7 o'clock meetings, and also in appreciation of the people that work full-time, and the remarks from them on a 7 o'clock start time being amenable to both their careers and to family life. So I will support the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. I have Councillor Green and Watson.
Thank you. I also will support the motion. I was one of three, I believe, 3 years ago or whenever it was, that voted against changing the time. So I had always supported that model. So I will support the 7 o'clock start time for council meetings. And I appreciate that this was not an easy thing to bring forward. But I also have appreciated all of the comments of my colleagues because, I was anxious to hear what people felt and had to say. And yes, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Green. Go ahead, Councillor Watson.
Thank you. Just a couple of comments about the motion and what it implies. I guess if we change the time, we really don't have, we have our observations of those who've been at the table through COVID, but we don't really have data that can provide any kind of causal relationship between who actually comes in virtually or in person into the chamber and the time of the meeting. So I'm not really sure, we're kind of making, I think the only thing that would be accommodated by the later start time is just that, is this respect for the dinner hour thing. I'm not sure that there could be any suggestion that it will change engagement or participation, because in my view, people will come to council virtually or in person if there's something on the agenda that speaks to them or they're interested in. And some of the agendas just may not have items like that. So we may be actually quite happy that sometimes there aren't people here because they feel they're engaged in other ways. And as staff have pointed out, there's quite a lot of back and forth with the community right now about certain things. So I'm not so sure we should be really worried about necessarily who's here, because I think that our agendas and what we're discussing is easily available, so the community does know what's going on here, and if they want to come, they now know they're welcome. So if I support this motion, and I'm still sitting here deciding what I'm going to do for the 7 o'clock start time, I think it's really only because it's the dinner hour thing. I really don't think in my view, that it's about participation or engagement. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm happy to make a comment here before we go to second speakers or see if any other hands popping up. So my take on this one is my preference would be to refer this item to be included in the options analysis for the in-camera portion. And I say that because I appreciate that it's true if we say this is our direction at 7 o'clock, that gives some clarity for the options analysis. But it also restricts those options analysis quite a bit. And I think this is a sum of the parts. And I do think that the start time is going to be a bit contingent on what we can do with the in-camera. And I would personally appreciate a little bit of, on paper, some reflection about what those impacts would be, pros and cons of the change of the time, to be done on paper so us and the public can understand the sort of the rationale for those changes. And I don't know that we could make that at this point as it is. So my preference on this one is that I definitely not opposed to the 7 o'clock start time. I think it has its merits, but I think it should be referred to be included in the options analysis for the in-camera, because I think those two work hand in hand, and I think there's some combination there. There's probably 2 or 3 combinations that could possibly work, and they're not always going to start at 7 o'clock for the main meeting time. So that's my take of this. I think I'm not a big fan of referrals back to staff if we can deal with things, but I think in this case there's sufficient merit in marrying the 2 items together in this. That's just where I'm sitting, but we have a motion at this time to consider the 7 o'clock as a guiding principle. Go ahead, Councillor Smart.
Yeah, I just wanted to speak to this one. I guess my primary concern is the engagement piece, and I agree with Councillor Watson that it's not, we don't have clear data on that piece. I'm tempted to think and believe that 7 o'clock will be more inclusive without further research. But I did just want to clarify, just to be clear, that because we're also taking into consideration councillors' personal schedules, that for me, actually, what we have right now actually works quite well. I'm not pushing the 7 o'clock time for my own personal interest at all, and but it's one for the public. And the other one is for me personally. I would just really prefer for the meetings to be back to back. If I had my first choice, it would actually be to have the in-camera after the council meeting, or at very least before, and not at some other time, just because we're allowed to mention that. Thanks.
All right, thank you very much. So with that, any other discussion on the motion as it's in front of us? Okay, I'm not going to make a motion to refer it to be included. So that's still my preference. I'm not going to support the motion if it's as it stands right now, just based on that. But I certainly appreciate the conversation that's gone around the table here. So the motion as it stands is to give direction to change the start time to 7 p.m. Going forward. Well, it's not immediate, of course, because it has to go through a procedure of bylaw changes and so forth. But that's the motion. Any other discussion before I call the question? Don't see any. So all those in favor? And those opposed? That does not carry. Is there any other motion arising? Go ahead,
Be
Councillor
appropriate to refer it to staff to include in the analysis?
It would be, I think, a motion arising, Mr. Coates, get your typing fingers ready here, along the lines of referring the issue of the main council meeting start time to be included as part of the options analysis for the in-camera, for regularly scheduled in-camera. Something along those lines would be appropriate as a motion arising.
I would make that motion, unless you want to wait for it to be typed.
I would just wait for it to be typed so that we can, and I'll let you wordsmith it once it's on the screen if that's.
I can see it.
Yeah, it'll come up.
No, I mean, I can see it.
Oh, I see. I can read it. I can read it aloud.
Yes, okay, that sounds good, I think, yeah.
Okay. Refer the issue of regular meeting start times to staff for analysis in conjunction with the in-camera meeting analysis.
So I would make the motion that we refer the issue of regular meeting start times to staff for analysis in conjunction with the in-camera meeting analysis.
Is there a seconder? Thank you. Any discussion on that? Councilor Braithwaite, do you want to speak to it?
Yeah, it could be that it comes back with the recommendation that we start at 7, which is fine, but I would like to, based on what I heard Councillor Watson and Councillor Smart say, and you too, Mayor, I would like to have that information at my hand to be able to make a good, sound decision.
Thank you. I'm just going to, if I can just speak in favor of this briefly, and I'll go to you, Councillor Appleton. What I saw in the vote of a 4-3 split on this is that there is not clear reason for change, but there's interest in change from what we have right now. And I don't want to take the option of changing it from 6 to 7 off the table. I think it's important for us to consider it. So I'm very supportive of this to make sure that we don't lose the option of shifting this from 6 to 7 in that options analysis. So I think anytime we're this narrowly split on something that is so sort of fundamental to public participation and the way we do business, I think throwing it out is not the right thing to do. I think we should have it come back as part of the options analysis. So, sorry, go ahead, Councillor Appleton.
Thank you, Your Worship. Not speaking against the motion on the floor, I would like this, as you mentioned earlier, I would like this matter dealt with now, and I think it is time to deal with it now. I would make the point, or I will just make the comment with respect to analysis, as the current motion sits on the floor, it references an analysis. I would make the comment, with comparison to the previous staff report on this same matter, the previous staff report just to do with, we were in a period where we were responding to changes with the procedures bylaw and also with the practicalities of implementing meetings with respect to COVID. So there are many operational and sort of logistical matters that played into how the previous staff analysis and the decision-making to move to the current 6 o'clock timing was presented. I would request, or I would humbly propose that an analysis in this case not consider exclusively those logistical components that were considered in the previous analysis, but also what will benefit community engagement the most, and what will be of significance to create an environment for maximum community access. The intent of this motion of my original motion was always to maximize community engagement. So I would ask that an analysis specifically reference community engagement and what would maximize that outcome. Thank you, Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Appleton. I'll take it that, given the right range of discussions that we had here today, and that I mean, I think the reality is we probably don't have enough data to give a clear knowledge of that, but I think what I heard was public participation, staff impacts, council impacts. I think there's probably some work done behind the scenes to just send out an internal survey to see what times and so forth might work for council. And whatever data we can find. I think all those pieces should come back as part of it. So I take your point. I think my expectation here is, given the options analysis request is pretty broad, that it includes those pieces as well, that the public participation and impacts. Again, there's pros and cons of different start times, what that would look like. So I don't think there's an amendment required for that. I think your point is well taken, that we want to make sure we include the broader impacts as much as possible in that feedback. Is that amenable by staff's perspective, that it would be as broad as possible, Mr. Coates?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I think basically that council's direction here is really broad, especially with the second piece added. It sort of throws the door wide open, and most certainly we've made notes about what council members individually have said, and there is a breadth of sort of understanding, a broader understanding of the objectives that are being sought here. And so while some of it is, and I think the discussion that's taking place tonight is a bit of crystal ball gazing in the absence of raw data and available data on what it might be here under these circumstances, which are continuing to change over time, and COVID certainly was a reason for some of the changes that occurred, and we're on the cusp of broader changes that sort of look to go closer to what things used to be like pre-pandemic. So I think the canvas is quite blank for us to come back to you with packages of things that might work and different ways in which things might fit together that I think could even include the structure of meetings that was noted sort of briefly, Mayor Murdoch, in some of your remarks as well, because it's something that we've been thinking about at the staff level too, as to how to build efficiency into that, but fundamentally public participation and availability and transparency are key considerations always. These are public meetings, and so that's certainly at the forefront of all the work that we'll do to bring back to you.
Okay, thank you for that, Mr. Coates. Any other discussion on the motion? Oh, cool, Councillor Smart, sorry.
I just wondered, hearing the appetite for having something resolved tonight, because I am very much in favor of 7 o'clock meeting times, but just not in the abandonment of not knowing what on earth is going on with the in-cameras. May I possibly put another sort of motion arising on the table that includes the 7 o'clock meeting times, but contingent upon the in-camera being attached to that at one end or the other?
I'm just thinking here procedurally how that would look like. I think that option would come back as part of this options analysis, but I appreciate if you want to have something resolved tonight. Yeah, I don't. That would again really restrict the first motion that we've already. I think given that it changes the motion that's already passed, it makes it a little bit convoluted for us to manage that way. But Mr. Coates, I'm going to turn to you. I don't think that's. I mean, it's not. if that's the will of body, I'll find a way to make it work somehow. But I think what we've got right now is a report coming back, if this passes, that encompasses all those options and brings it back in reasonable order. But if that's, yeah, I probably, I don't know, Mr. Coates, any thoughts on that one in terms of revisiting that original motion or?
So, Your Worship, through you, there's a process for that. And that would be to reconsider a motion that's just been made. And council could reconsider a motion that's been passed and change their mind on that. So in thinking about the motion that council has passed already is for us to report back on the start times for in-camera meetings. And so before council right now, you're considering whether or not to refer the issue of regular meeting start times to staff for us to include an analysis in step with that on the in-camera meetings. And council defeated a motion to have the meeting start at 7 o'clock. So when we think that one through, essentially, so that motion's been defeated and it's on the vine, so to speak. Council could reconsider that motion and make a different determination on it. Yes, you could.
Okay. We have a motion in front of us right now on this one, so I think that would have to be another motion arising, not dealt with as part of this piece. So yes, we can come back to that if that's the will of council, to look at that as a second, to revisit that issue. So I'm going to just deal with the motion that's here right now, which is to refer the matter of the main meeting start times for analysis in conjunction with the in-camera. I'll let you figure out how you want to deal with that if you're also interested in bringing back the other piece. If you want to vote it against or in favor of it. I don't, yeah. Anyway, so we have a motion right now is to just include the start times back with a complete option analysis. Any more discussion on this item? Go ahead, Councillor Watson.
I just want to finally say that I do think the two things are joined at the hip, and I would prefer seeing the broader analysis before making a decision about the 7 o'clock. Thank you.
Thank you. I've already said my piece on this, so I'm not going to add anything else. All those ready to call the question? Give people a chance. Okay, all those in favor of adding this? Any opposed? I have 2 opposed. Sorry, Councillor Green, Councillor Appleton, and Councillor Patterson opposed to referring this matter. Okay, that does pass. So we will, at this point, we are now expecting a report that includes start times of in-camera and regularly scheduled meetings. Are there any other motions arising? Not technically arising from this motion, but it is in order. All right, thank you. I'm just going to make a comment. I appreciate, and these are very close. What's interesting, I don't think it's out of bounds as part of this process for staff in their options analysis to reach out to members of council to understand what their availability is for various times and so forth. That's totally doable within this. So I think part of this will come back. Some of these, like the constraints, the personal preferences, these sorts of things will come back as part of that. So we're not, and I think that's one of the benefits of this approach, is that we're going to have a little bit more time to kind of consider those pieces and try and find a model that comes together. So just for the record, I think that is a part of the thing going forward. Sir Councillor Smart, you had your hand in there. Oh, can you put your microphone on?
It would just be good for me to know logistically too what kind of space I would have to attend remotely. I work in an open office. I don't understand exactly where I would go to have that meeting that would be secure enough. That's my main concern.
Councillor Appleton?
Thank you, Your Worship. And while I don't disagree with your comments on that specific item, I guess I will just speak for myself. I can only speak for myself in the sense that whatever time council elects that meetings will occur, I will be at those meetings. That's my commitment to council. Whether or not I personally am available for meetings at different start times is not actually weighing into my decision making in this case. So this is just my own opinion, but in my view, whether or not the current members of council are available for a meeting at a given time, and that was not the original intent of why I brought this matter before council. Again, it's whether or not it provides engagement for the public, and whether or not an earlier start time or a later start time provides a greater opportunity or a greater, one thing that hasn't been mentioned to this point is whether or not there are people who would consider running for council that would choose not to because they cannot make those start times, because they cannot make those earlier start times. And folks that are working and have young families, in my view, as an earlier start time may provide a disincentive. So I just wanted to make that point that while I don't disagree with the concept, and it is important to consider what current council members made it, as far as I'm concerned, the primary goal should be what provides engagement and accessibility for the public and prospective people who may wish to sit at this table. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Appleton. I appreciate that sentiment. I think when we're looking at this, people did run for council with the current start time. So I think if we're going to change those and any member of council can't make a start time on a regular basis, that would cause problems, obviously. But I appreciate that the goal of this, and again, hopefully we'll have this further discussion, will be those broad pieces of the community need and the council need. So thank you. All right, need a motion to adjourn at this point, I think. Moved and seconded. Thank you. Any further discussion on adjournment? All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. Thank you very much.